Well, howdy, neighbors. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Ron Hayes, and I am sitting in for a colleague of mine, Jill Dunkel, who is with Feedlot Magazine. She was unable to be here today to share in this conversation in Houston at the 2022 Cattle Industry Convention. And what a great gathering of cattle producers this week, looking at policy issues, looking at checkoff issues, learning new technology tidbits, and just been a great meeting thus far here in Houston, downtown Houston, at this 2022 Cattle Industry Convention. What we want to do over the next several minutes is we want to spend a little bit of time talking about a very important subject that has really kind of surfaced within the last couple of years within the cattle industry. Really goes a little bit further back than that. Early on, we saw some of those early models that the cattle industry invested in regarding the footprint, the environmental footprint for the beef business. And along the way, sustainability has gotten to be a very hot topic, a very much a buzzword that goes well beyond the cattle industry. And as we think about that, we wanted to spend a little time about this concept of environmental stewardship and environmental sustainability that our cattle producers do a really good job of. And I think you're going to meet some guys that do a tremendous job in their own right today as we go around and talk about this topic that we're going to really zero in on. One of the things that we do and have done for a lot of years within the business, and that is the practice, the best management practice of implants. We're going to be talking a lot about that today and how that fits into this whole concept of environmental sustainability. This last August, at the most recent cattle industry convention that was postponed a few months because of the pandemic, the cattle industry NCBA came out and actually made a declaration regarding their belief that the cattle industry could indeed actually commit to the concept of environmental sustainability. In fact, specifically the concept of committing to climate neutrality. And they put a year out there, the year of 2040. A lot of things that our cattle producers do already contribute to that, and there's ways that we'll be able to make that even better in the years to come. But really, what does environmental sustainability, what is it all about? And to help us out with that today, very happy to introduce you. And I want to basically, before we actually go to Ty, I want to actually go around and introduce the entire panel that's going to be with us this afternoon here in Houston. First of all, closest to me is Dr. Ty Lawrence. Dr. Lawrence is the chair of the Meat Science Department at West Texas A&M University. He's been a long-time member of that department, 18 years, in fact, at WT. He's conducted a couple of the largest cereal harvest studies in the country, done a tremendous amount of work in meat science, and just really the heart of the Southern Plains feedlot complex and meat industry. Right beside Ty, we've got John Hepton. John is a nutritionist. He's been involved with Performix Nutrition Systems, 28 years in the business. He's been involved with feedlot operators. John's been involved with cow-calf. He's been involved with stocker backgrounders. Really, if you name a part of the beef business, the beef pipeline as far as live animals are concerned, John's had a role in that in the nutritional conversations with these producers. Right next to him, we've got Trent McEvers. Dr. McEvers is with Dean Cluck Feeders and a couple of feedlots, right?
Yes, sir.
And we've got that, not only a couple of feedlots, but a couple of backgrounding yards, grazing cattle as well. He's been responsible for the marketing of cattle, customer relations, procurement, and research for the company, and he's been actually on staff at one time at West Texas A&M as well. So I had a chance to kind of look at both sides of the equation when it comes to the industry for sure. And finally, we've got one more gentleman that's going to be with us today from the producer side of things, Dr. Randall Raymond. Randall is a Director of Research and Veterinary Services for Simplot Livestock. They are the #2 beef cow-calf operation in the United States. A couple of very significant feedlots as well. They graze a lot of stockers in their operations. Dr. Raymond's been with Simplot for 14 years. He heads up the animal health programs, the internal, external research, genetics, manages all the research and purebred cattle operations as well. You're a busy man. You've got a few things. You got a few things on your plate. With that said, let's just jump into this whole concept of what environmental sustainability is all about. And Ty, if we might start with you first of all, give us a kind of a working definition of what it means within the beef cattle business to be environmentally sustainable.
Thank you, Ron. So let's start with the word sustain, which at its core means to continue for some period of time. And if we elaborate on that a little bit more and think about sustainability in a larger context or maybe a different definition, we can say that we want to meet the needs of the current generation or the current producers, but we don't want to sacrifice the needs of future generations. So how can we meet the needs today and allow for those future generations to flourish in their own right years from now? So let's take that to the environment. Okay. So how do we maintain fertile soils? How do we maintain an available water supply? How do we maintain the growth of plants and the growth of our animals in a healthy manner that feeds the nation today, feeds our export partners around the world today, and then allow for that future growth and those future opportunities to come?
We've got quite a spectrum within our industry, and we've got it all represented on this panel as well. We've got obviously the rancher, we've got that backgrounder stocker operator, we've got the feed yards. Then we take that meat ultimately to the consumer. When it comes to the ranch end of the business, why do we need to be so aware, you think, of environmental sustainability?
So at the ranch level, that's basically where our grasslands are. And if we talk about environmental sustainability, and you talked about carbon capture and carbon neutrality, our grasslands across this nation are our single greatest carbon sink. And so we have a resource that is continually renewable. And we're able to utilize that resource with our ruminant animals to provide human edible protein year after year after year. And we've got to champion that message that this sustainable resource that is capturing carbon is also feeding the world.
When we think about the concept of sustainability, we're trying to always improve our ability to save resources, to be more efficient, be more effective, to sustain the family along the way from a financial point of view. How do implants fit into this whole concept of the environmental sustainability, I guess, timeline for our cattle producers?
Sure. So implants allow the animal to better utilize feed in the conversion of feed into food. And so if I took basically all of the data and all of the knowledge that has been gathered thus far, I could say that by providing an animal a growth-promoting implant, we can produce an improvement of feed to gain or gain to feed, however you like to work that math, of approximately 13%. And so that's a big number when you get to thinking about it, and then you multiply that over the millions of cattle that we utilize as food and the number of years that technology has been around. We have made more and more food for humans out of the feed resources that this nation provides. And that's a great message. That is a sustainable message that has been going on for at least 60 years now.
Quite a history, wonderful history. I started in farm broadcasting, agricultural journalism in the 70s. And one of the hot things that were being talked about at that time was Ralgrow. And I want to bring in our final member of this panel today, Dr. Wade Nichols. Dr. Nichols is with Merck, 30 years with the animal health business, and Wade, you were telling me that literally most of your career has been involved with implants. So there's a lot of history within this whole practice that we're talking about today.
Yes, sir. So I was first hired by Herx Roussel and to help bring Revalor on the market. It was approved in 1991 in November. I was hired in July to help bring that process to fruition and then do a lot of research subsequent to that. But your point of how long we've had implants on the market, revalor-xs was first approved in 1956. So we've been using implants for 66 years. 66 years. Very safe, very efficacious, and through all that time, especially from 56 to 91, there was a lot of research conducted. From 91 to now, there's been a plethora of research conducted on how best to use this technology in order to get the benefit from that technology to the consumer through the producer. So yes, we've been at it a long, long time. Very safe, very efficacious products.
Very, very true. And Ty, you mentioned the financial benefits, that 13% number. That is a big number. And Randall, you know, when you think about your operation, you oversee a lot of different animals, as far as from some cow-calf operations all the way up to your feedlots that you're responsible for. What's the financial sustainability story, you think, for implants?
Well, I think Ty touched on it pretty well. I mean, it's trying to maximize the efficiency of the cattle systems that we have in place. And one thing that really resonated with me that Ty said, a lot of the operations that we deal with and the country deal with, that forage can't be utilized for anything else. And so when we try and think about how to utilize those grasslands, and in our case, a lot of desert country, we want to be able to take what resources there and make them the most amount of food and human consumable protein as possible. So from a financial standpoint, I mean, that's really just one aspect of it. But when we think about utilizing all of the Earth's resources for the good, it's using every tool in the toolbox that's available to us, and implants are a big part of that. From a concept of return on investment, you know, we've been able to utilize this technology, as Wade said, for 60 plus years and find ways to really leverage the investment in that technology for return. And there aren't that many technologies in this business that are like that give us that kind of return on investment, which is important. And we try and find ways to use those inputs most efficiently and get the most output.
For the cow-calf and for the stocker operators, it is a great opportunity to be able to increase that potential bottom line, I know. Trent, let's talk a little bit about feedlot into the business. How does a implant, in other words, the implant strategy, that practice, how does that help us when it comes to the financial sustainability, the financial well-being of the feedlot industry in this country?
You know, I like to think of implants as a tool, and also basically the implementation of the implants within this industry on groups of cattle really comes down to understanding how those animals are going to perform, and then how many days we're going to have those cattle in the yard, how much grain we're going to feed to those cattle. And really what I always like to come down to, and what I like to think about in terms of the sustainability side of this thing, but also the profitability side of the feed yard end, is that at the end of the day, everything we do revolves around a precious, very precious resource, which would be water. And so understanding everything from the moisture in the grains that we bring in to the conversion of those grains, as well as hay, as silage, whatever you're implementing in your diet, understanding how those are being converted into protein, and healthy protein at that, and then really meeting the demands for the consumer. The consuming public, we've seen this grow since the 90s in terms of the quality of the cattle that we produce today. That's a big adage to the genetic selection at the cow-calf level, but it's also taking those animals and meeting their maximal performance and maximizing the God-given genetic potential of every group of cattle. and making sure that we don't short sell those cattle, and really implement these technologies in such a way that we produce a high quality product that is tender. And because that's my biggest fear is when you go to a steak place at night with your family, you hope everybody that orders a ribeye, orders a strip, has the same exact experience. And that's what that's kind of been my focus. And that's what I want to continue doing in my career.
I've heard it many times before that our ultimate goal has to be that great eating experience every time.
I mean, they're our ultimate. The consuming public that's our customer. I mean, we sell cattle to all these different packing facilities. We buy cattle across the entire U.S. But at the end of the day, it's going to be on somebody's plate.
John, from a nutritional point of view, you're a nutritionist here on this set of producers. How does that implant strategy, how does that fold into how you plan your nutritional strategy for the cattle you're responsible for?
Yeah, so we work really hard. We look at a lot of research on the nutrition side. It's always changing. How can it advance? And Dr. Raymond, he's a vet by trade, but we focus so much on how do we keep cattle healthy? How do we keep them performing to the most efficient ability that they can, and implants fit right into that because, again, as Ty pointed out, we get more efficiency, more high quality red meat on less feed input, and that is really the sustainability story. But without the right nutrition along with that implant doesn't have the opportunity to express itself with the amount of efficiency that it could. So it plays hand in hand with the efficiency and nutrition and health of the animal.
Got a question kind of go around the entire panel on right now. Just, we're talking about, and it kind of started with the conversation with Ty about this, trying to define and get our arms around environmental sustainability. The sustainability is one of those things that almost table stakes for the industry because we've got so many companies. The NCBA jumped in with a pledge of carbon neutrality, but before that, you can name the fast food business operation or the major supermarket chains or a lot of other companies that have all said we want to be carbon neutral. We want to show the consumer that we're doing the right thing. Have you ever really thought about the concept of implants being a part of that environmental sustainability story?
Let me start. Sure. So, in a word, Ron, yes, we have, and there's actually some fantastic data in the published research literature that says if I have an animal, and let's call it a NHTC animal, no implant received, and then I compare it to its twin that received an implant, we're going to produce more human edible protein with lower carbon equivalents simply by putting in that implant. And the research is clear. It's carbon appropriate, if you will, to utilize implants because we're producing more with less resources. And that is paramount, just like John was saying, more with less resources. And we're going to produce more food with less carbon equivalents if we use an implant.
I think part of it is a lot of best management practices that we do in the cattle industry are environmentally create stability, sustainability, and we didn't really even know it. So I grew up on a ranch without electricity, and yet my dad implanted our calves, right? So I lived in an environment, we lived with the environment, and I don't know one rancher that doesn't want to pass that ranch, that lifestyle, that managing of the resources to their child or grandchild. We are, our nature is to be sustainable in the industry that we have. And so it's great to have an opportunity to have a product like an implant that adds to that and be able to partner with Merck and figuring out how do we get the best efficiency out of different implants and continue that legacy of sustainability.
Something that I want to stress is that, implant programs and cattle and everything that we do is not just a decision you make on a piece of paper. It's an art. Understanding the type of cattle that you have coming in, understanding the challenges you may have or may not have, understanding what the potential for those calves coming in as a 6-weight feeder steer, what you think they're going to do at the end of the day, and then fitting a protocol, an implant strategy with that animal, and so that it's not just so that everybody knows that it's not just every 6-weight steer does this, every 7-weight steer does this. It's an art, and it's something that we constantly are tweaking to try to hit those targets that our customers want. But by doing that, at the same time, we're also improving the sustainability of those cattle by everything that we've already discussed in terms of conversions and things of that nature. But really, as we step into more value-based and value-added marketing of cattle, there's more and more focus, even shifting back to the ranch level, of discussing how we're really growing a carcass. Every single day, we're adding pounds to a carcass, and understanding what that means, not only to profitability, but to sustainability, is key. And at least that's just my thoughts.
You know, this conversation is a little bit like the antimicrobial stewardship conversation, where this is one tool in the toolbox to help us really maximize the value and the cost of every individual animal. And by cost, I mean really the use of resources. Back to that conversation is, you know, how do we really utilize every input to its full stability and get every animal to Trent's point to its optimal endpoint. And I think it is very critical that we look at each individual program. We evaluate the process and the procedures with the end in mind, that we really have a definition of what we think that end product needs to look like, and then we apply the appropriate tools. And implants are just one of them. There's lots of other tools that get us to that point. But it's really about using all the science, all the biology, and putting all those pieces together to really make the most of everything that we have at in terms of the resources we're managing. Cattle being one, the land being one, and our socialization, our culture, our society, trying to make sure that we have the ability to feed people for a long time.
Wade, did you want to weigh in from maybe the corporate side of the world?
Sure. So, from our side, it's all about, like John said, so what other industry can pass a piece of land or a ranch down for 150 years and not be sustainable? You have to be sustainable to be able to do that. So, like John said, we've always done it. Now it's becoming a buzzword, and now we got some of these other things to help us along the way, and implants being one of them. And the research that we do as a company helps, like Trent said, develop a 6-weight, and with this goal in mind, the research that we conduct helps them decide which implant protocol they want to use. So it all goes hand in hand together. Sustainability from the ranch side, the research to help people utilize better resources and manage those programs along the way. And then we have the veterinarians too. They help us with the health program.
All righty, I'm going to jump back around to the nutrition. And John, could you share with us maybe kind of the strategy that you use in your operation and the people that you consult with regarding the most, I guess, efficient, effective implant strategy, whether we're talking about from the calf side all the way out to the feedlot?
Yeah, so, like Trent pointed out, it does vary. From a higher view, basically, we want to have every animal to have an implant strategy for as many days as we can. Because if you think about sustainability and efficiency, you want to be efficient every day. And so there's no reason not to have an animal under, but we will start, I've got backgrounders that bring ball and calves in at 5 weights, and other guys will buy an 8 weight, that's just ready to go to the feedlot that they don't have to transition. And so there's specific implants for the backgrounding phase. And then we're going to transition. And typically as those cattle go to a higher plane of nutrition, we're going to use a different implant. But really our goal is to maximize every day on feed with an implant to give us more efficiency, more high quality protein with less resources.
Randall, in regards to, we've talked a little bit about the financial side of things, but what benefits have you really seen as you've been able to utilize implants in your operation? Again, you've got a pretty wide range of ages that you're kind of responsible for.
Yeah, and John kind of mentioned this, but we deal with lots of different cattle types and varieties, and they're all a little bit different. And so, we've fed cattle in places in the world where implants aren't available or they're not. And so I think a lot about animal welfare, and I think about animal health and growth and performance all in that same vein. And in order to get the same growth profile we get out of implanted steers, for example, there's places in the world that feed a lot of bulls. And that creates a whole different set of challenges in terms of animal behavior, and a lot of cattle beat each other up. There's human welfare and human safety concerns there. And so those are challenges that we can get around when we utilize a much smaller level of hormone to create the same kind of performance issues. So, it's each cattle type is quite different, and when we think about what their endpoints are, I think that's how we arrive at the conclusion of which implant program is appropriate.
Trent, from your experiences with, I guess some of those terms that we've heard from, if you ever took an animal science course in your life, you heard about feed efficiency and average daily gain, all those kind of things. How does an implant fit into trying to push that bar in a positive way?
So when I talk to my guys, and when we really start focusing on implant strategies and then thinking about growth, we always kind of go back to the old school growth curve, the sigmoidal growth curve, prenatal, postnatal, all the way into the marketing end of this thing. And what we need to realize is that every time we use technology, that we also shift where that animal finishes. And so at the end of the day, and I don't know if I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but at the end of the day, we need to understand that as that technology influences the conversions, the gain to feed, the average daily gain towards the end, we not only improve that protein deposition, and some of the older research that's been done, because we harvest cattle on the same day, would say that we typically would improve hot carcass weight somewhere around 7%, which is huge. But at the end of the day, the financial aspects of this comes down to looking at every single group almost like a piggy bank. We are putting a product in front of them in that bunk, hopefully at the same time every single day, 3 times a day. And we are trying to maximize their growth potential, but also minimize the days that we push those cattle past their viable endpoint. And that endpoint really comes down to when the cattle start converting more of that energy into fat than the protein. And that's really the whole goal. That's my short thoughts.
Now, Ty, as they've talked about some of these strategies and how they've utilized them for the various classes of cattle, from the calves all the way out to that feedlot, one thing kind of jumps out at me is this whole idea of really trying to maximize those returns. And it kind of goes back to some of those things we said right at the top as far as that financial well-being of these producers. This is something that this strategy, which has been around for a lot of years, does actually make a difference.
It does. So if we we get down to an economic return, you're going to find numbers out there in the literature that vary a little bit. On the low end, 10 to 1. And so what I mean by that is the return on investment would be 10 times what you spend on the implant. So let's say we spend $2 on an implant. On the low end, we're going to get $20 in return. That could either be in live weight sales, it could be in carcass weight sales, but it's in the sale of a product that we're putting into the beef production stream. On the high end, easily 30 to 1. And so the variance really gets down to the potency of the implant and then the days of activity of that implant to continue to add to that growth curve that Trent was talking about. So a good 10 to 1 to 30 to 1 return on investment would pretty much pick up the entire implant industry.
As John alluded to, there's a different strategy for the different classes of cattle, from your calves all the way out to those that are headed into the feedlot or in the feedlot. Wade, when it comes to the Merck product lineup, how does the lineup that's available through Merck today fit into the things that you've heard from these producers?
Yeah, well, in my opinion, Merck has the whole line, and we've done a plethora of research, since 91, Ralgro since 74, and Revalor since 91. So we have Ralgro for the cow-calf industry, and then once those calves are weaned, we have revalor-g for the cattle on grass. Then once they get to the feed yard, we start them on a intermediate dose like revalor-xs or IH, and then we can go to revalor-200 when they get to 80 days or 100 days from harvest to push those cattle to that point and do more with a lot less when we get to that point. We also have revalor-xs and xh for those people that don't want to re-implant in the feed yard. When I started in 91, I'd do a meeting and somebody would inevitably ask, why don't you guys come up with something we don't have to do this darn re-implanting? So we started that project in 94 and finally got our product approved in 2006 in terms of XS, so we can give our producer the option where they don't have to re-implant. One thing I would like to emphasize is something Randall talked about, and they have fed cattle outside the U.S. where implants are not available and had to look at bulls and things. So all we're doing with an implant is taking a little bit of that testes and putting it in the ear so that we get the positive benefits of growth without all the negative association with a full testes. So if we tried to feed bulls, like Randall said, the facilities would have to be stronger. We'd be tearing them up. We have health concerns with the employees and dangers of that type. So all we're doing is just taking a little bit of that testes, put it in the ear so we get the positive growth response, and we can do a lot more with a lot less with our resources.
And what I'm hearing from you is that it's been it's been kind of almost an evolution of these products as you've heard feedback from producers. You try to meet the needs that they bring to you. I like the product, but I could use this added in.
That's correct. So, in 91, we had revalor-s approved. It was 120 milligrams of TBA and 24 of estradiol. Well, at that time, we knew we needed something less than that to carry this cattle through for the first part of the feeding period. So we developed a lower dose implant to take it and put them in when the cattle first arrive, and then we can go to the next higher dose. And so what we're trying to do is build that dose over time into the animal so that we get the growth response that we need at the appropriate time. So we use the correct implant, the correct dose at the correct time. And research has proven how that helps these guys develop their implant protocol.
Okay, our producers here, what motivated y'all to consider the Merck implant products?
I think for us, or for me personally, and to pass it on to the clients that I work with, a lot of it is the amount of research they do and the amount of good research. Just like today, people can talk about a lot of different things, but really what really matters is, do they have good scientific, solid data, replicable, that you can have confidence in? And so, one of the things for me is just the amount of research that they have done, practical research in the field with repeatable results. And then that gives me the confidence to share that information with others so that we can all make the best decisions and all be as efficient as we can be.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit to that. I've heard Wade say quite a few times, and I agree with this completely, that the biggest boost we can get is making the decision to implant or not to implant. That's where we get the biggest benefit. But there's a lot of subtle differences from one implant program to the next. And we've had a lot of questions over time as we've developed different types of cattle or fed different types of cattle or different types of feeding strategies, and have had questions about what the most appropriate use of this technology is, and have been able to do some of those studies with the help of Merck and really try and understand what that strategy really has as an outcome. And when you really are able to do that in an appropriate manner where you have enough data, you've replicated enough times and can have confidence in it, then you can make much better decisions. And there are definite differences between implant programs and between different types of cattle. So some of those questions really deserve an answer, and putting some resources towards that's important.
I mean, I'll add to it briefly, but in my opinion, there's an interface with every product out there of research and service. And that's what it really comes down to. If any product that we use typically has sound research, but is also coupled with very high level service that I think Dr. Raymond has alluded to. And really that's what it comes down to. And also guys that like Merck that understand the consumer focus that I think all cattle feeders should strive to learn more about how and who our customer is, how that's changing, whether they be an export market or a domestic customer. I mean, that's just how we're going to grow to meet their demands, because we don't want to lose it anytime soon.
It really is all about trying to meet that need of that customer. And sometimes I guess there's some educational efforts that you've got to do along the lines with some of the practices that we do use along that way. You know, it was mentioned, Wade, that you know, there are some folks, you know, that say, well, I'm going to make a conscious decision not to use implants for whatever reason, marketing program or just their own personal decision. What kind of conversations have you had with folks that are maybe on the fence about, well, you know, I maybe used them a generation ago, but I want to come back and look at them.
So Rhonda, it's interesting. So in the feedlot industry, we don't have that conversation. 95% of the cattle are implanted. And the other 5% or less than 5% are NHTC, never ever, organic or something, in some kind of a program. So as long as they're in a program, that's fine. You know, somebody might think, well, you're against all those. I'm not. Any pound of beef we sell, beef disappearance is good. We'll sell one, we'll make two more. So that's all good. So in the feedlot industry, I don't run into non-use except for those programs. When I go to the stocker industry, 90% of those cattle are implanted. And again, they're in some kind of a program or to get there. The place that we're having the feedback, negative feedback, is in the cow-calf. Only 28% of those are implanted today. And almost all of that comes from they're hoping for a premium somewhere. And what I want to tell people is hoping for a premium is not a good strategy. They have to be in a program, NHTC, some kind of never ever 44 farms that's giving them a premium. But to get that, you have to do the paperwork, you got to pay a fee to be in the program, and it has to be third-party verified. If you're in those programs, you're getting the premium, that's great. But if you're just a cow-calf guy and say, I'm not going to implant because I'm hoping that somebody's going to give me more money, you're just wishing in the wind.
Yeah, I guess a lot of that is the ongoing conversation, if you want to call it that, with the Europeans from literally from the 1980s, when we first saw this whole concept of not wanting to take our cattle implanted as far as beef into the European Union.
That's correct, and that's a political decision on their part to save their industry, because if we allow American beef in there in great quantities, they'll eat American beef rather than what they're raising in Europe. And even with that, they only allow so many tons of American beef in, even that's not implanted. So it's totally a protectionism on their part to try to save their own beef industry. It has nothing to do with safety. We've done the Lambing Commission all the way, through the FDA. We've shown the safety of these implants. They have 0-day withdrawal. It means I can implant tomorrow and sell them the day after. It doesn't matter. They're very, very safe and efficacious. Every living thing has a hormone. I don't care if it's a plant or an animal. They have to have hormones to survive. And the definition of a hormone is a substance secreted in one part of the body, travels through the circulatory system to have an effect on another part of the body. That's all it is. And everything has a hormone from plant to animals. And we're not appreciably adding anything. Actually, you could argue we're taking less because we're not feeding bulls. So we're taking less out of the human supply and making the more positive impact in terms of what we're doing in the feeding industry.
Wade or Ty, that fairly low percentage on the cow-calf use of implants. Any reasons, or y'all hear folks talk about why they make that decision? Outside of being very specific, very intentional in marketing. Are there some other things, myths out there that people believe, or what do you hear?
No, again, it's that. For the most part, they're hoping that they get a premium for those non-implanted calves. And, there have been a couple of really good studies. We're partners with Superior, and they give us their data, and then we send it to Kansas State to be analyzed, and they have positively and unarguably shown that there is no premium for non-implanted calves. When you normalize the data for data of year, sex, and weight, there is no premium for non-implanted versus implanted calf. The only premium you're going to get is if you're in a program. You are signed up in a program, have the paperwork, and it's third-party verified. So, and that's the only thing that we're really looking at.
Got to do that too. Got to be intentional.
It's got to be intentional, exactly. They have to sign up for those programs and be accepted. So, I suppose there's probably some that think, that, well, maybe it will be better off without them. I think that's very few. I was in Montana last week, and cow-calf deal, and almost all of them use implants at that point. And they understand the benefits. If they're in one of those programs to get a premium, that's great. But, for the most part, I think people understand these things, and the number one deal is they're just hoping for a premium somewhere.
The one feedback I get from some Western ranchers is that they're not 100% confident that they'll get a weight gain advantage on a weaned calf in a dry environment. And so I think that's partly that they don't get the opportunity to see weight gain in a measured fashion like we do in the feed yard setting. And they don't necessarily get to measure their forage disappearance or that feed conversion like we do in the feed yard setting. That being said, there's been dozens, if not hundreds, of studies that have looked at that, and the weight gain advantage in a weaned calf is right around 20 pounds. So it's a pretty solid data set, and I think a lot of it's just not complete understanding for some ranchers that value is there, and it's there pretty consistently.
Ty, when you mentioned some of those economic benefits early on, and the fact that we've got some solid numbers there. Maybe let's transition though and think a little bit about the practices of actually being successful in getting that gain from using that implant. What are some things that maybe you've shared with producers down through the years about how they can best, maximize the opportunity when they implant their cattle?
Okay, so let's start with we've got an animal in the chute. Okay, to set this up for success, let's clean the ear. So let's get our brush out, let's get a solution of chlorhexidine, let's scrub that ear and make sure that we're inserting this implant into the ear in as sanitary manner as possible so that we don't have a lesion in the ear that might prohibit the implant from being picked up in the bloodstream. So we're gonna start there. Next is some training of our employees and make sure that they know A, how to scrub the ear, B, how and where to put that implant. We're going to say we're going to move it to the back side of the ear, and we're going to put it in the middle 1/3 of the ear. We're going to avoid a previous implant that might have been there. We're going to avoid an ear tag, and we're going to set this animal up for success. And we want to do an implant check periodically in a feed yard. We could also do it at a slaughterhouse. So we want to do some checks and balances to make sure that, yes, we put that in, we did it appropriately, and then we want to back that up with some data to say that you're doing a great job, and these animals are implanted correctly.
I've heard some folks talk here on the panel about timing also. what advice do you have regarding best timing?
So when that animal's coming into the feed yard, day one is best timing. We need to get that in early and promote some growth, promote some conservation of existing protein that they already have in their body, and then we can look forward into that animal and see, like Trent's been saying, the composition of the gain of the steer or the heifer, and maximize that resource, the feed resource that we're using, to hit the animal's optimum composition of gain so that we market it at its optimum endpoint. And there's really no set prescribed system with the implant regime. There's a little bit of an art to it, as Trent mentioned. The system for a 4-weight heifer is not the same as it is for a 9-weight steer. And that's okay. But the eye of the beholder understands how that animal is going to grow and how to maximize the feed resources that we can to produce the most efficient human edible protein possible.
I think working with bovines, you're going to almost assure yourself that it's going to take a little bit of art. It's going to take a little bit of finesse to make that successful. Wade, as far as the company, the research that Merck has done and how you are most advantageous in getting those implants in place. What are some of the recommendations that Merck has developed over the years?
Well, I think Ty hit every one of them for the most part. So just making sure we're sanitary. We have a clean ear, a clean injection site. You place that implant under the skin of that ear. You take your thumb and you run over the top of that implant. That does two things. It lets you know that the implant has been placed in that, and you squeeze it. It moves the implant to the back of that incision site, and then you squeeze that incision itself to help heal that incision site. So he's covered most of it. We do offer a performance evaluation program where we'll come out, we'll check implants in feed yards and backgrounders. It's a little harder on the cow-calf side, but we will check those implants. We offer training to anybody that wants it. We'll come out and train people how to implant, watch them, and give them some advice, along the way. The other thing they can do is, a quality control step. If I'm implanting 100 calves, I want to make sure I've got 100 implants that I've given. So I count my implants, that I've given versus what's left in the cartridges. Make sure that we put 100 implants in. So those kind of things are what are available and what people need to think about.
I want to shift gears, if we could, just a little bit and talk a little bit about kind of your own personal preferences as far as, when it comes to that implanting protocol. What are some things that you have done or kind of have gotten most comfortable with that seems to give you the most success when you get to that working with cattle and getting those implants in them successfully? Anybody?
Maybe before we go on to that question, I want to echo what Wade just said, that training is extremely important. And so having crews that are capable, willing to learn, willing to take feedback, willing to improve when things are not exactly right, and that makes a huge difference in how well the technology works and how the animal welfare aspect of our jobs turns out. So maybe ask your other question again. Wade was distracting me.
As when you think about how you are seemingly, you feel most satisfied, you feel most successful when it comes to getting those implants in. What are those things that you're doing you think really gets you to that point of, hey, I'm in my sweet spot of doing it the right way?
Well, from a technical aspect, it's just lots of practice. It's making sure that the training is appropriate and that there's lots of practice, and not everyone does it the same every time, or doesn't learn as quickly is probably the better way to put that. Not everybody learns as quickly and gets the technique down as rapidly. But with practice and with oversight and with quality control and with feedback, we can be successful and teach most anybody from the ranch side, the guys that are at brandings or calf processings, all the way through the feed yard system. It can be successful training. So I think the sweet spot is probably a moving target. It's continual feedback and continual training, and making sure that those people feel supported, they have the appropriate training, and that they're getting the right feedback so they can make adjustments where necessary.
John, I would kind of think that when you start talking about a preconditioning lot or a feed yard, they're handling enough cattle that they've probably gotten pretty comfortable in making sure they do it the right way. I guess the cow-calf end of the business, maybe they don't maybe are having, they're not handling quite as many the volume of those implants in working with their calf crop annually. They maybe need a refresher, or they need to be encouraged a little bit, you think?
I think that's probably right. In the feedlot setting, like Wade was saying, 95%, that's a huge number. And all the things that you guys have talked about in terms of doing it right, I think those practices are in place. Got to stay on it, continue to train. But it's probably true of the cow-calf. They're not as used to it. Who's working on the branding crew this year and that type of thing. So I think it just continues to take that, effort into training on the cow-calf side and encouraging those guys. It's not hard. It's just a matter of, they got to commit to it and do it right.
Mm-hmm. How do you all, I think, we heard from Ty as far as a good strategy is to evaluate your work from time to time. You kind of check up on how you're doing. We heard that from Wade as well. Do you all have any particular process or protocol within your operations that you're working with, either advising or actually that you've got direct skin in the game on? You do some things, periodically, just to make sure that things are as they need to be for the implants?
I mean, there's opportunity using technology that's out there, whether it be from Animal Health International or Microbeef Technologies, but all of those basically grant you an opportunity to do some auditing. And what we like to do is really set back and post-evaluate a lot of things in terms of, okay, what did we think these cattle were going to do? Did we give them too much of an implant at the beginning, or should we have stepped back and maybe gave them a lower dose because of potential issues with maybe it's intake? Maybe they're a set of calves that you had to escort off the truck by hand because they were weaned on the truck or something of that nature. And it took them a little longer to get used to the bunk and used to their new home. And we want to match implant with calorie intake and make sure that we don't give for example, like a Revalor 200. This is where I go back to a 6-weight heifer. She may be a 6-weight heifer, but that doesn't mean she's a yearling. She's very likely could just have got off mama. And so sometimes understanding where those cattle came from and trying to read the cattle as they unload and look at their behavior and spend some time in the pen, kind of like the Tom Knopfsinger type approach, but spend some time in the pen, kind of take a look at them and see what's going on, and then make sure that when you make that decision, which typically is within 24 to 48 hours of arrival, that you're doing the best that you think you could do for those cattle. Because sometimes taking it low and slow at the very beginning is the right approach. Even though you have a tendency to want to give those animals a higher dosed implant, like a 200 versus an IH or whatever it might be. But that's just my thoughts. So every single opportunity associated with that can also be coupled to pen space and some of the things we do on that end to maximize the efficiency of the feed yard and to be the most sustainable yard as possible is to have a full feed yard with all your pens full to the capacity what that makes sense based on seasonalities and everything else. And so some of these implants you have the opportunity to give a lower dose to a larger group of cattle, knowing that at some point you may get into those cattle and do some sorting and do some things that add value to that group, whether it be pulling those heavier cattle off because, if we look at the distribution of an in weight in a group of cattle, that distribution could be up to 12% in terms of a CV. So what that basically tells you is you can have 500 to 600 pounds from top to bottom in a group of cattle that you thought on average weighed 6. So there's a lot of individuals in there that we have to take into consideration. And there's a lot of opportunity there to maximize the potential for that group by using the grow technologies coupled to sorting. And that doesn't have to be through the chute. You can do it on foot. You can do it on horseback. But altogether, there's opportunity there that could be coupled to a good implant strategy.
And Trent, you alluded earlier to the fact that you've looked at some of the information available from the various companies that offer implants. When you look at the information that's available from Merck and from others that are offering implants, what are you looking for as far as research information, product information? What gets you interested in that particular product line?
Well, I tend to, any type of technical opportunity or a bulletin or whatever it may be, I usually look at those, but then I also typically get on Google Scholar and start really doing some literature review and start thinking about where did they, first of all, I typically ask, what all trials, were you summarizing here? And then are any of those things published? And then the published data, another good thing is when it's open access. That tells me they paid a little extra money to make sure that data has an opportunity to see the light of day. And as an old grad student going through WT for felt like 20 years, open access articles are kind of important when you're doing a literature review. But you've got to go back and start looking at not only the statistical analysis, but the design of the trial. Was it powered correctly? Making sure that everything they did on their end led to a meaningful result, and that p-value and those values that you see there can be trusted and that are repeatable. That's what I think every single set of any type of research that you look at. I don't care if we're talking about implants to beta agonists to any other type of product that's out there. To me, those are the things that are those are the non-negotiable things that have to be looked at. And if you don't have that, then how can I go and make a meaningful, how can I make a decision for an operation when I feel like something's good versus when it's proven? That's my thoughts.
Can I add to that just a second? Two things. One on previous question on quality control. One of the things we do is we have our feedlot employees trained in beef quality assurance audits. I recommend my customers do the same thing, but also we do take advantage of Merck's program of, hey, let's run these cattle back in and give a check. How are your guys doing? Are they getting them in the right spot? You know what I mean? Is there anything they're doing? Is there any abscessing? So we take advantage of that service that they provide for us. And I would echo what Trent says as well. And we've done research with Merck. In one area that I work in is, we call them calf ranches. It's basically baby calves that would come from a dairy, that would be dairy or beef crosses. We did a big trial there. And we actually found that for that first period, say up to 150 days, we didn't see a benefit from implanting, but certainly did from that point on. So just, good research, the transparency, the trust, all that is a huge factor in us choosing them.
Now, jumping from the calves to some of our, obviously we're feeding cattle to heavier weights. And Ty, I know you've been involved with some research on some long-fed cattle, and have you included implants into what you've looked at on some of those heavier weight cattle that are coming into the yards now?
We have. So we just completed a large serial harvest trial 2 years ago, in which we started with some 5-weight calves, 5-weight steers, actually that Randall grew back in Idaho, and we transported those to Canyon, Texas, and then we grew them over a 378-day feeding period to just over a ton. And wow. The amazing thing today with today's genetic capacity, we easily grew those cattle to a ton, but I'm here to tell you the genetic capacity for cattle to grow is far north of that. The actual end point of a steer today is probably around 4,000 to 4,500, maybe even 5,000 pounds. And when I say that, I mean the actual maturity of the animal, which is the point at which protein would stop being accrued. We're nowhere near the genetic potential of an actual steer today.
So literally this long-standing trend of producing more pounds of beef with fewer animals, that we're not there yet.
And I don't know that we'll ever get to where we can get to, but what I want everybody to understand is cattle can get much bigger than what the beef processor can handle today. And it'll be a long, slow climb to get cattle bigger. But I know everybody on this panel would agree that we've seen cattle grow, and they do year over year. We technically add about 6 pounds to the carcass of an animal year over year, and have for the last 45 years.
Literally. So when you think about, going back to that initial little conversation we had regarding environmental sustainability, we got Ty to kind of give us some ideas of what that really is all about, what it looks like. For your operation, when you've got implants and you've got all the other best management practices, you feel good about where you are on environmental sustainability right now?
Yeah, it's a great question, and what does it mean, and how do people understand that in our business? The more that it has become a buzzword and the more attention it's got, I think for myself, it allows me to reflect back, well, what am I doing? Right? What things have I been doing? What more can I do? I think for the most part, we're doing what we can do. I think maybe just as important is we're open to what else is out there. What else can we do? And how measurable is it, and that type of thing. But I think we're definitely on the right track. As I stated earlier, I think that's in the DNA of a rancher, and taking care of the environment and being sustainable. It's in our DNA. We can't get it out, but we're certainly, looking for more opportunities. Maybe Merck will come out with an even better implant, right? Or the next technology will come down the road.
Yeah.
The next technology will come along, and we can do an even better job. So, we're open to that. We're trying, we care. And it's just kind of who we are.
So something I want to add to it is implants are just a small piece of what we do every day. And as a producer, it doesn't matter if you're a cow-calf guy and you're thinking about rotational grazing, or you're thinking about cow efficiency numbers, you're thinking about pounds weaned per acre, whatever you're using to measure that, that's one thing. The other end of the spectrum is thinking about anything you can possibly do at the feed yard to reduce carbon footprint. It could be as simple as changing up where you lot cattle and how you position cattle within the yard so that you have fewer truck miles. You could improve your mixing times. You could improve your starch. Check your starch availabilities often. Check your dry matters. Make sure you're constantly working to maximize the grain and maximize the product that you put in the bunk, and then reduce the amount of time that feed truck's out, and how fast you can get that. Though every animal, so a really wholesome diet right in front of them every single day at the same time. That's just my thoughts. It really doesn't get much more complicated than that, but it really comes down to people, right? You have to have good people that are bought into that process.
John?
Yeah, so one other thing I was thinking about that I'm pretty passionate about is, if any food that anybody takes a package of a cracker or whatever it is, salad, there's a byproduct. There's a part of that food that can't go into human consumption. And millions of pounds of our food would either go into landfills or can be fed to cattle, whether it's a wheat product or a corn product or this byproduct. We feed everything from apple peels. They make the little squeeze for kids now. We didn't have that for my kids, but they have them now where they just suck it right down. There's a byproduct for every food there is out there. Now, it can go in a landfill, and it can create heat and all that type of thing, and end up doing nobody any good, or we can feed it to cattle. And as a nutritionist, I get pretty passionate about that. How can we utilize that? That's sustainability. That's efficiency. And then the other part of that is, some people might look at the, manure as a problem. In our area, it's a huge benefit. Either manure or compost takes the place of mining phosphorus out of the ground, right? All plants, everything that we grow takes nutrients. Well, compost or manure is a fantastic nutrient that can be utilized for those plants without having another footprint somewhere of making a commercial fertilizer, whether it's digging it out of the ground or processing it. So our industry, we do a lot of things that people don't recognize that actually are great for the environment and sustainable and efficient already.
Randall?
You hear a lot of passion on this panel about what we are doing, and I would say, as the people on this panel and us as an operation, we feel very comfortable. We like where we're at. We like what we've done. We are proud of what we have accomplished and the way we handle cattle and the way we handle the environment. We see lots of opportunities on the horizon to get better, and I think that's part of the culture that you're hearing this discussion revolve around, is looking for that next best thing, looking for the next opportunity, whether it's a genetic solution, which is something we're working really, really aggressively to find solutions for health traits or challenges with growth or challenges with the end product. I mean, what are the genetic solutions for that? What are the other solutions that we haven't yet thought of to handle compost differently, handle byproducts differently? And the people sitting up here have all had lots of experience in that. We're really passionate about all of those issues, and that's what drives us to look for that next solution, the next opportunity to make us better tomorrow.
You use some great words there: pride and passion. Ranchers and cattle producers care. I know you guys care about your cattle, about the product that you're going to give, sell down the pipeline, and that consumer at that local grocery store is going to buy, or at the local steakhouse is going to enjoy. You want them to have that great eating experience. I know you do. So congratulations on a great job, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences with implants. We've kind of turned it every which way, I think, and we've looked at a lot and had a lot of great information. Wade, from your perspective, what are some of the takeaways that you've heard today from these outstanding producers?
Well, I think number one is, like you said, their passion. I mean, you can hear it in their voices. You can hear it in the things that they're talking about. And what we do in the industry is being sustainable and providing a good, safe, wholesome product for consumers around the world, basically. And John was really good about the things that the cattle industry does and the things that we can do in feeding different byproducts and things, to get rid of it and actually put it back in to a healthful product that you can use as a carbon sink, basically. You could call it that. So when we talk about carbon credits, I don't know that people think a lot about.
We're not getting credit for that.
They're not getting credit for that.
We're not getting credit for that credit.
And I don't think people know that. John said, I don't think they know that. The other thing that stands out to me is every one of them talked about an implant protocol, the judicious use of implants. I think there's some in the public and even within our government think that we abuse these implants. And we've shown through research and practical experience that abusing implants is non-starter. It's not economical. It actually costs us money when we mess that up. So starting an animal on the correct implant at the correct dose at the correct time, all these guys have reiterated that. And that's how we use the implant. It's a tool that we figured out. We know how to use it. There may be something better on the horizon, but for right now, for economic sustainability and environmental sustainability, implants are one of the best things you can utilize to get that done.
So if we're looking for more information on implants, give us some information. How to get folks learn more about some of these technologies, protocols that we've talked about.
Right. Well, I'm going to have to read this, but it's Merck-animal-health-usa.com. That gets to our website. You can call customer service at 800-521-5767, or you can call me, Wade Nichols, at wade.nichols@merck.com, 806-445-3398, and I can direct you to where you need to go. I've been doing this for 30 plus years. I think I know the research and how to use these things. I mean, what I tell people when I give a talk, that we don't know exactly how they work. And when I die and I go to heaven, my wife says, there's no way you're going to heaven. But if I do, God and I are going to sit down. He's going to tell us exactly how these things work. But we have an idea how to use them to get the sustainability model in both economic and environmental, where we can improve. So, yes.
Wade, thank you so much, sir. Gentlemen, thank you all so much for your time. Great conversation, great discussion. And thank you for tuning in today to watching this. And hopefully you've learned a little bit more about how implants can be an environmentally sustainable practice for our beef cattle industry today and for the years to come. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you soon.